everybody. We are so happy to have you with us tonight. My name is Gabriella Becker. I'm a Community Engagement Coordinator with AISD, and we're so thrilled to be able to offer this opportunity to build community and learn together for our vertical teams. We've anticipated some topics that we think might be important to y'all, and we will be offering a panel-style discussion as well as question and answer portions throughout this event. If you have any questions that come up while we're doing the panel portion, please feel free to type those questions in the chat, or if you'd prefer, you can save them for when I announce the question and answer portion and unmute yourselves. We'd love to hear from you as well. If everybody who is participating with us here today could share their name and their school affiliation in the chat so we could get to know each other as we get started, that would be great. And this meeting is being recorded. So if you'd like to revisit something or share it with somebody you know who wanted to be here who was not able to make it, we will be recording it and uploading it at a later date. So thank you everybody for taking the time to come sit with us tonight and to learn a little bit about what's going on. With our leadership team, I'm going to go ahead and let our leadership team start introducing themselves, starting with Superintendent Dr. Elizalde.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. This is the first of a series of community conversations that our community engagement team put together, and so we're learning from each of these, and we will reflect on feedback so that we can continue to improve our communication, especially given the challenges of COVID. But I am Stephanie Elizalde, and I am humbled, truly humbled, to be the proud superintendent of Austin ISD.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Elizabeth Casas, Chief Academic Officer. Happy to be here with you tonight.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Mays, Chief of Schools. Happy to be here and a part of the conversation.
Good evening, Stephanie Hawley, Equity Officer, and welcome to the conversation.
Good evening, everyone. Sean Brinkman, Chief Technology Officer. We appreciate you being with us this evening.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My name is Ashley Gonzalez, and I am the Chief of Police for the school district. Excited to be here and engaging with you.
Good evening. Leslie Stevens, Chief of Human Capital. Happy to have you all here this evening.
Hello, my name is Jacob Reach. I'm the Chief Officer of Intergovernmental Relations and Board Services, and excited to be here with our LBJ and Northeast Vertical teams.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Wallace, Executive Director of the Office of Innovation and Development. Thanks for making time to be here tonight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matias Segura. I'm the Acting Chief of Operations, and I look forward to our conversation this evening. Thank you.
All right, I guess I'll go
So
ahead
much, everybody. Having a little bit of a technical issue here. The classic Zoom problem. So we know that what is probably at the top of everybody's mind for the next few weeks is the end of the school year and what that's going to look like. So I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Anthony Mays to talk a little bit about graduation, prom, and other end of school year events.
All right, so I am very excited and very happy to announce that we will be hosting graduation. And while it may not look the same way it would normally look, minus COVID-19, we will be having outdoor ceremonies at our athletic centers. And so those will take place May 28th through June 3rd. We will have a variety of safety measures in place, including temperature checks as well as screeners, and graduates will only be able to bring at least 4 guests to help us maintain social distancing. So we're going to be celebrating in a safe way. In addition to our graduation, we will also be hosting our prom. So we want all of our students to have all of those rites of passage that you would normally have in any other instance. But again, we're going to be doing it in a safe way. Food will be packaged. Students will be able to bring 1 date. They can't bring 2, but we will have an opportunity to celebrate prom in indoor and outdoor facilities. But again, we want to do that in a safe way. So that's something to be excited about.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mays. I think something else that everybody is definitely thinking about is next school year. Of course, understanding that the situation is unpredictable and could change at any moment. Dr. Elizalde, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about what next school year and the summer session might look like.
Thank you for that. And before I get carried away, I want to take a moment to thank our interpreters, both ASL interpreters and our Spanish interpreters as well. And want to thank Gabriela for hosting this event and guiding us through this process. And of course, thank you to all of you for taking time again out of your day to join us. This summer will look differently than it probably has before. We certainly don't want to just get to a point where it's like, okay, it's summer, we're just going to return back to the way things were. We also know we have to work together to ensure that all of our staff and families have an opportunity to spend some time with their families in a way that is hopefully has less anxiety now that vaccines are out and now that we're seeing the numbers of COVID cases declining over time. That being said, we know we need to provide some services to our students, of course, especially those in transition grades. I like to call it the handoff. So when we hand off from 5th to 6th grade or from 8th to 9th grade, those are already challenging changes for our students. And so that's an area in which I know Dr. Mays and the school office is working together with our campus principals to ensure that we have some summer programs that will be able to provide some support for those handoffs. We also know that our high school students who have a very different way in which they get to move from one grade to another, that's our credit system or the Carnegie unit of credit accumulation, as opposed to just getting grades and you move from one grade to the other. They also need some additional support. So there are a variety of priorities that our school's office is working together to provide, but it will be a little different than what we've provided in the past. And we also want to make sure that it's in a way in which, again, we continue to utilize all our safety measures and see what type of services are needed. Then I think Ms. Casas is also working on, particularly with students with our special talents, that those individual students are provided some of the compensatory education. I just saw one of our attendees, thank you for asking that. So there'll be a plan with regard to those students, as those also, wherever we have an opportunity to begin to provide those compensatory education services, we want to be able to do that. For next school year, what we do know is we are looking forward and we are energized to provide a more traditional face-to-face experience in our campuses, as our staff members will have all had an opportunity to be vaccinated. We also are hearing positive results from information regarding vaccines for students, but we also know that masking and all of the safety measures we've held in place this year are successful. They do work. And so we want to continue to utilize those practices. That being said, there may be some students for a variety of reasons who may still need a virtual option. Now, keep in mind that we're still waiting to hear official notification from the agency that they will actually fund that. But Austin, being the way Austin is, we always want to be unique, or as we call ourselves, Austin Weird. And so we will be exploring that opportunity for those situations where we may need some virtual opportunities. We don't know exactly what that will look like because we don't want it to be a top-down decision or process. So Dr. Mays and Ms. Casas are working together at the campus level through our associate and assistant superintendents to ensure that we actually get something that's created from the level of implementation to which it will be applied. There may be opportunities for us to also extend what we've learned from virtual instruction, and that is that perhaps there were some courses we haven't offered because we didn't have enough teachers with a particular certification or a particular content area. Well, we could use virtual instruction as a means of being able to reach more students rather than saying, well, we didn't have enough students to offer that course. Lastly, what we do know about both face-to-face and virtual is that we are not going to expect our teachers to continue to do concurrent or simultaneous teaching of both face-to-face and virtual instruction at the same time. So as we continue to develop what the virtual instructional model will look like, parents will have an opportunity to make that selection, and we will need our parents to make that selection for a minimum of 1 semester so that teachers can be dedicated to that particular instructional approach. So campus principals will be working with their teaching staff to see both how many students are requesting that once that particular design is formulated, and then which teachers would want to request to deliver instruction in that manner. So it's going to be fluid, but we want to do our best to see how many of our student needs and our families that we can meet.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat about feeder patterns and boundaries and how some of those are going to be, what we can do to improve those feeder patterns, especially as we're opening a couple of schools.
So I can start, Dr. E, and of course, I know that you'll jump in. We're having ongoing conversations in particularly about the Northeast, the future middle school in that quadrant of the city. And so those conversations are ongoing, and we'll be leaning on the community to help build around some of the program needs that are going to be at the school, as well as some of the lines. I know I'm looking at the question in the chat, Eastside ECHS. That is also a conversation that's ongoing, but we are working to try to make sure that all of our kids get the opportunities wherever they're going to have the good stuff. And so whether we're talking about the middle school here, or we're talking about Bertha Sadler Means or Gus Garcia, we want to make sure that everybody has ample opportunities to have programming that ties directly to the feeder high school. I'm trying to look down at the question again about the McCallum transfers and siphoning off students. Again, we want to strengthen the quality of all of our programs. So no matter where a student goes in AISD, they'll have all of their needs met, and that'll be a quality experience. And so again, these are ongoing conversations that I know that we will be leaning in and leaning next to the community to talk about, what these opportunities look like from one campus to the next.
And let me just add that we're going to switch interpreters.
Thank you so much.
Jamie. Thank you so much. This is one of those where as a public servant and certainly as the superintendent, I really want to be one of those that's like, whatever questions our community has, I want to have the answers. And this is one of those that we won't have the answer as Dr. Holly continues to challenge us. This has to come, we have to make sure that community engagement on all of these types of issues actually is community engagement. And so there are a couple of different ways to look at the challenges that we have with our vertical teams, which obviously you all are asking the questions that we need to continue and really begin to dive into in a more strategic fashion. So some of this is, we all know that we need to ensure that all of our schools have the resources necessary, particularly for those programs like an early college high school program. And so we are going to dedicate ourselves to ensuring that we do that. And so if they need the support for those programs to be successful, we need to make sure, just like we have those types of positions for other programs, we have to dedicate them to an early college high school model as well. We have some partners that really want to continue to work with us, and we need to leverage that. Part of ensuring that we have to have quality programs at every single one of our schools, which we know that's what our community expects, and we should be able to deliver that, and we will work towards ensuring that. And we also want to make sure that if we are offering a variety of different programs, that's accessible to all of our communities. So Dr. Mays has initiated, working with Mr. Segura, a transportation adjustment. We are also recognizing that some of our students, because at the end of the day, we all recognize that it is only a choice to go to an early college high school if you can get there. And so we have to be realistic in saying that it's a choice, that we need to remove barriers if we really want it to be a choice. So Dr. Mays, again, is working with Mr. Segura on that particular area. I believe we've even added some changes to Gus Garcia and Bertha Sadler Means with transportation. And I believe we've also are working on a proposal to change what the state pays us on. Keep in mind, right? The state pays us on a 2 mile radius. Essentially, any families that live outside of a 2 mile radius, we provide transportation. If you're within the 2 mile radius, then the state does not reimburse us the transportation costs. So in general, school districts then say, well, that's how we're going to provide transportation. Well, leave it to Austin ISD. You all have challenged us. And so yes, that's true, but we're going to invest. We're going to invest in that transportation for our students with regard to, in some instances, it looks like we're going to be reducing that 2 mile radius to half a mile for some of our elementary campuses in some areas. We also know that that has been a big factor in some of the charter schools that have students attending, is because the charter school goes and picks up students from an apartment complex, and because it's within the 2 miles of one of our elementary schools, we don't stop at that apartment complex, or we didn't. Those are the changes that we're bringing forward. So we know it's a complex issue. Thank you so much for raising it. I wish I said I had an answer, but I also know that the truth and the transparency is more important. And so we will continue working together. That will become part of our strategic initiatives as we talk about increasing enrollment, because what we really do know is we have to make sure that we change the conditions or improve the conditions at all of our schools so that our students and families choose Austin ISD.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. And I'm seeing a raised hand from Cuitlawak Guerra. Please forgive me if I mispronounced, but I'd love to let you ask that question.
Yeah, you did. No, you did great. And I appreciate everybody talking candidly about what's going on. My question specifically that I don't believe was answered was about attendance zones. The boundary advisory committee the district had was dissolved. And so this may go in the bucket of we don't have an answer. Yep. How is the district going to approach drawing and redrawing attendance zones with 2 new secondary schools coming online in the next 2 years?
Yep, and that is you did give my answer with regard to the fact that there are different ways to do that. And so the traditional way, right, is, well, you can still use community engagement, but we can say we get community engagement and then we're going to redraw these boundaries. But we also know this, you can redraw boundaries all you want to. If people don't think that those are actually quality programs at their schools, or that their particular child isn't getting what they need at that school, parents are going to choose with their feet. And so we have to do both things. But the easy answer to that is we have to make sure that we as school people don't come in and say, this is the traditional way feeder patterns are done, and so let's do them here. It's going to be, we do know we need to re-engage that, even if it's not drawn, that committee is drawn up exactly the same way, but we know we have to create something like that. For this next school year, what we did commit to, the board committed to this prior to my arrival, was that with East Side, we would be keeping the attendance boundaries that exist currently. So even though school will be located in a different area, the current boundaries, and teammates, you all correct me if I misstate, those will stay the same for now. We will use a year of data collection to see what adjustments need to be made. Secondly, there was also a question about, well, some students live right around the new location and would technically have to apply for a transfer in order to go to a school that may be like right across the street. So we're making some minimal adjustments, but we're not changing any boundaries. We're going to give a section of that community, for lack of a better description, dual attendance zones. What we do know also currently is, specifically with high schools, once students are already engaged in a high school, rarely will those students now go to a new high school, right? So I think to your point, sir, we need to also think about where our middle schools are. And that's, I think, that alignment that you're referencing. So don't have an answer yet. We are looking at what does that committee look like? Who should be on it? What are the parameters around it? And then how do we go about ensuring that we get the best answer that our community wants to, that the community can support, not something that we decided at a central location. I hope that helps somewhat. I feel very inadequate when I can't give like this is the way we're going to do it, but we don't have an actual roadmap design just yet.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. And if there's any further questions on this topic, as we think about it further, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Gabriella Becker. I'll share my email in the chat later. And you can reach out to me and I will make sure that we're aware that you're interested in getting involved with that, and any opportunities that come up, as they come up, we'll be sure to reach out back to you. But I'd love for us to move on next to another very, very important topic, the budget. I'd like to open it up to Ms. Leslie Stevens to talk a little bit about how, we know that we're facing potentially some budget challenges, and I think people are very interested in knowing whether or not that's going to affect staffing at our campuses.
Yes, thank you. So in Austin ISD, we were planning for this school year to have 80,000 students. So we staffed for 80,000 students. Currently, for this school year, we have 75,000 students enrolled. And so there's a difference between the number of students we staffed for versus the number of students that actually showed up. Next year, we are planning on having a projected enrollment of 77,351, which is currently, 2,300 more than we currently have enrolled in our campuses. But it's also a couple of thousand less than what we're currently staffed on. So in looking at that, the district uses staffing guidelines in the spring every year based on some projected enrollments to determine how many allocations each school receives. In looking at those for next year, if we'd have used the same staffing guidelines that we used for this year, for next year with a different enrollment number, we would have removed about 622 positions off of our campuses due to the difference in the discrepancy in what our enrollment was versus how we were staffed. Instead of, just using the old, guidelines and applying them to our new enrollment, we literally looked at our staffing guidelines and started to look at them in terms of through an equity lens. In doing that, we know that the greatest resource we have in this district are in personnel. About 85% of the district budget is in personnel, with the majority of that being teachers. So our greatest resource is teachers, and we wanted to try to match where we had the greatest needs with our greatest resources. So we added some what we call weights to our staffing guidelines so that schools who had more students who were economically disadvantaged were counted at a higher weight, so that that campus then got factored in to their projected enrollment and ended up with additional teacher allocations to meet those student needs. And this was at the secondary level. Also at all levels, elementary and secondary, we waited for special education for the position of counselor and assistant principal. And the reason for that is there are some time requirements regarding to the paperwork and holding the ARD meetings and those kind of things that require administrator and or counselor time. And so we waited for those in our staffing guidelines. And at the elementary level, the other shift we had was we took our projected enrollment by grade level, divided them into our two programs, like how many dual language students do we project and how many Gen Ed ESL students do we project, and we divided that number by our 22 to 1. In doing that and in revising those staffing formulas, we are now going to have approximately a 200 to 250 reduction of allocations on the campuses. And that is due to this, the difference in our student enrollment. However, what I want to emphasize is Austin ISD hires approximately 600 to 700 teachers every school year, so that those 200 who may not be at the campus they are this year will be an employee of Austin ISD at one of our schools. And so no one is losing their employment with Austin ISD over these shifts in staffing guidelines.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Stevens. And I know that budget is tied very closely to attendance. And so I'd love if somebody from the leadership team, perhaps Dr. Elizalde, could explain why in-person attendance over the next few weeks, this last portion of the school year, is so important.
So thank you again.
Interpreters.
Thank you so much. The state, the Texas Education Agency, are everybody's favorite friend, originally started by asking us to just keep track of our communication with students, that we had them engaged in some form or fashion. So whether they logged in was not seen any differently by the agency as whether they actually logged in and stayed in and continued on. In addition to that, those that are coming face to face. So with that, the first semester we were held harmless. They make fancy terms so that we can all think, that they're brighter than we are, or some reason they come up with these terms. Nonetheless, what that meant is that what we need to do is we need to ensure that that our students, that we were not going to be penalized for students who, that for this semester, that attendance component. They were actually not going to utilize then our attendance, but rather just the enrollment. For the second semester, in order for us to, and that has happened. So for the first 6 weeks, first, second, and third 6 weeks, we are not going to be penalized for having so many students in person and so many students virtually, and how long they were actually engaged. For the second semester, in order to be held harmless, we have to hit 20 percentage points above the October date, the last Friday or last Thursday of the month. George Gogonas will have to correct me if I've got the wrong PEMS date. I'm right? Okay, so I got a thumbs up from our financial expert. So that was 23.6% of our students face-to-face. So suddenly the agency has switched from just in connection with to face-to-face. So now they want us to report how many students are actually coming face-to-face. If we do not hit 43.6% as an average for the 6 week, we will not be held harmless for the second semester of funding, meaning they will actually then reduce our funding for the second semester even more than they already have, based on attendance and based on the fact that we do not have 43.6% of our students attending in person. So that last 6 weeks, as things continue to improve, it is going to be important that if our families do feel comfortable, and now that we have our staff had opportunities for vaccinations, that we would be able to have students return to on campus in larger numbers, like we've seen at the elementary campuses. We know that's going to be a struggle, but it will have an impact on our funding from the state. Of course, it applies to every school district, not just Austin, but we're, of course, responsible and concerned for our family of Austin ISD.
Great, thank you so much for that important update, Dr. Elizalde. Before we move on, I'd love to address Ms. Flores' question. We're hearing that there are different weights being assigned to ensure appropriate staffing. How are we going to ensure access for students to those staff members?
Yes, so at a campus level, at a secondary level, when you do the weighting of economically disadvantaged. So one of the things that Austin ISD has had and has done in the past, which I think is very unique to Austin ISD, is they have, so campuses receive two types of resources out of the general budget. One are the teacher allocations or the staffing allocations, and the other is non-staffing dollars. So in Austin ISD, there has been a tradition, and I don't know how many years it has gone on, but they weight non-staffing dollars to a campus at a 1.2 for economically disadvantaged students. So if a campus had, and I need a number that I can like rapidly do in my head, but if a campus had 100 students who were identified as economically disadvantaged, then they would receive $120 at a 1.2 weight if they were doing $1 per student. So it's weighted for the number of students on campus identified as economically disadvantaged. We took that same weighting and applied it to staffing. So a campus, it will receive more staffing. And so at the campus level, there's a variety of options. And like I said, it's at the secondary level that we did this. There's a variety of options a campus can do. They can look at their classes and say, you know what, we want our English classes to be smaller than 28:1. So we want to make those 25:1 and use an allocation that way. Or they could say, you know what, we want to offer our students AVID as a program and offer, you know, hire a teacher for that particular program. So each campus is currently working on things like, what are the student choices, you know, in terms of like kids every year pick their courses for the next school year. They're picking their courses, they're looking at what students want on their campus, and then they'll develop their master schedule. And then they use their teacher allocations to match those up the best they can.
Ms. Stevens, I think I'm going to ask Ms. Casas to add something here, because I think the question isn't necessarily around how we are distributing the guidelines, but actually the utilization. And I would rephrase it, and Lisa Flores can correct me, but it's more about an accountability issue of, are those positions then being utilized in the way?
Permission to clarify?
Yes, ma'am.
So my concern is this, students receiving special education are frequently, and let's look at this in an honest way. I think any parent can verify, and I'll probably see some heads shaking. And yes, students receiving special education are frequently only siloed to their case managers to help them with any issue on campus. So my concern is they're generating staff that they won't have access to, like counselors, because counselors kick them to the case managers. So I understand in theory on a high level that they're generating more staff, but my concern is that students receiving special education and students considered economically disadvantaged will become currency for staff without actually benefiting from those staff.
So
I know my student doesn't have access to, and also to counselors on campus because they kick us to the case manager. So I feel like as a community, we need to look at that in a real way, because everything looks nice on paper, but in the real world, it doesn't work out like that.
You make a great point, Ms. Flores, and that is incumbent upon the new procedures that we put in place for special education to provide those clear guidelines. Because if a student needs counseling services, then they should have access to the counselors. And so how are the new staffing ratios impacting students? Well, on the one area, it's reducing the class size ratio so that there's less students in the classroom. And the majority of our students are in the gen ed setting, receiving inclusion. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, but you make a great point, so that we can make sure that as we provide operating guidelines that we're clear about who's serving the kids. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Flores and Ms. Casas. I know enrollment is also a priority of ours, so I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Jacob Reach to talk a little bit about the priorities we have for that and some of the work that we're going to be doing going forward.
Sure, thank you very much. So I do want to talk a little bit about another priority for the district, which will be enrollment next year. We do know that for these last few years, we have seen a slight decline in enrollment year to year, but actually the 1920 school year saw a slight increase, especially at the middle school level. And we know that that really is due to our campuses doing outreach directly to families and sharing the great things happening at all of the campuses. So we want to continue to do that. And as part of our Operation Reconnect, our enrollment plan, we'll be starting April 10th with a block walk around many of our neighborhoods to encourage families who we expected to have enrolled in AISD this year, but for one reason or another, did not end up enrolling. Encouraging them to return back to Austin ISD and talking about what we can offer at our different campuses. We're also going to start an enrollment office, which will be focused around efforts like these, but also creating a smooth process for families to enroll and register into our schools.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Reach. And I know that we've been making a lot of changes to put support where it's needed for our students, and I'm hearing that there is certainly a need to continue those conversations and continue making those changes. And I know that equity is one of the things that's come up today. It's come up in every meeting, and this leadership team has been very proactive and affirmative about including equity as a priority in all of the work we do. So I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Hawley to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing as a district around equity right now and some of the opportunities that community members have to get involved with that work.
Good evening, and thanks again for this opportunity. I really appreciate you all choosing to be here today. And one of the major changes that we've made, and we consider it a reset with the community, is the establishment of the Equity Advisory Committee. And this is a group that's been organized to provide the superintendent with recommendations to ensure that we're really authentically staying with the equity agenda. And the way we organize this, and kudos to Dr. Elizalde for embracing this model. This is a different model for the district for an advisory group. We have community and district co-chairs, 2 community members, and then 2 of our AISD staff. And we've invited students, administrators, teachers, and we've opened this up in such a way that we actually are going to get to know each other. That is our desire and our hope. And these are going to be monthly meetings. And they're not just going to be about sitting and connecting, but they're also going to be about getting some work done. And if you look at the diagram to the right, one of our major subcommittees, and so as you look at what Dr. Elizalde likes to call the petals on this bloom, and I'm gonna shift and let Dr. Elizalde talk about this bloom a little, but I want to call your attention to the community building and education. We are at AISD in the mode of doing some healing with our community. And so we want this advisory committee to be a space and a place where we genuinely get to know each other, and we have shared language and we have shared experiences. So we will have dedicated time during these monthly meetings to learn about the history of our district, to learn about one another, and to truly connect. And so and I know a lot of you have asked about the equity assessment, the third-party assessment. We have a subcommittee that will be getting together soon to help us identify the focus areas for that subcommittee, and as well as a process by which we identify a vendor and an assessor. And so I'm going to shift. Dr. Elizalde, will you walk us around the rest of the flower petals and share the alignment that we have with the board's priority?
Thank you. From one Stephanie to another Stephanie. Thank you. I think when I saw this, I told Dr. Hawley, this is the equity flower petal blooming. You know, if you look at each of these circles individually, they're just that, they're just a circle. And yet when you put them together in such a fashion, they create this bloom. There are 4 areas of these 6 that are directly aligned to our strategic framework, our vision, our mission, our values, and our priority focus areas. Thank you so much for whoever did that for me. That's great. So when you see those areas, what's I think very important to recognize, if we can go back to the flower petals, is that when we engage in this work, this needs to be something we do with the community. It's not something we do to the community. And many times we think, oh, well, here's what we're going to do to help. The way we help is by listening and engaging our community. And so one of these, the areas here is that instead of having all these things separate, is to ensure that what we do is we actually overlap and align. So our strategic plan that we're in the middle of developing for the 21-22 school year aligns with this, and it aligns with the equity action plan. And so as we continue to stay focused in an alignment, we will be able to reach our student goals in a more effective manner, taking on these challenging issues and working in alignment together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. And I know you kind of very briefly touched on what the process and what the next steps around our strategic plan would look like. I'd like to invite Ms. Michelle Wallace to talk a little bit about how we take this framework and where we move with it next over the next several months, a year.
We're going to switch ASL interpreters now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Michelle Wallace here with the Office of Innovation and Development. The board, you may remember, approved the strategic plan framework, as Dr. Elizalde mentioned, that includes kind of the big pieces of our strategic plan: the mission, vision, focus areas, values, all really important. And we don't have time to get into all of that today. Our 4 focus areas: student well-being and achievement at the center, of course, teacher and employee well-being, culture of respect, customer service, and fiscal stewardship and prioritization. Those were set by the board with equity as a foundation. You know, they considered equity as a separate focus area and really decided against that, and that they wanted equity to come through in each of the 4 focus areas. Right now, as Dr. Elizalde mentioned, she and our leadership team are working on developing strategies and then specific action steps for next year under each of those strategies for the plan, utilizing feedback that we've received from the community along the way. And then also, as Dr. Elizalde mentioned, really looking at the equity action plan and the results of the community engagement that Dr. Hawley's team has undertaken over the last year.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Wallace. And before we open it up for general Q&A, I'd like to invite a couple of the members of our leadership team who haven't had an opportunity to highlight some of their priorities or the work that they're doing to briefly give us a summary. First, I'll invite Ms. Casas to give us some priorities and some updates around academics.
Thank you. Well, with the focus on outcomes, we have 2 hot priorities, which are our services for bilingual students and students receiving special education services. And so definitely making sure that the campuses have the staff that they need, so that on the dual language side, that not only our emergent bilinguals can graduate bilingual and biliterate, but also any community member that wants to participate with our dual language programs. And then on the special ed side, you know, there are several questions in here about the services of special education. So we are working hard to build that leadership team up so that we can make sure that the services that we provide are really impacting our students and changing the student experience so that all of our students can graduate to be productive citizens. On the academic side, we are revamping our curriculum, making sure it's rigorous and engaging for our children, and that we're focused on accelerating the learning, knowing that this has been a challenging year. So lots of information will be coming out soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Casas. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Sean Brinkman to talk about the work that we're doing to increase Wi-Fi and tech access.
Thank you for that, Sean Brinkman, Chief Technology Officer. So we're going to continue to address the digital divide gap that we have in this district. We have an approach now to provide every student a hotspot We're looking at other opportunities to build out a sustainable high-speed broadband to the student's home. This is getting a lot of attention at both the state and federal level, so you'll probably see some of this on the news. But we want to put together a plan and make sure we can take advantage of those opportunities. Next year, we'll also be modernizing some of our back-end systems, specifically our HR and finance systems. As we go through that transition and modernize those applications, the district should realize some increased efficiencies. That'll help us manage our budget, maintain our budget, onboard teachers, get them through the process faster, and support them throughout their employment in AISD. So those are some of the things we'll be working on next year.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Chief Gonzalez, would you like to let us know what AISD Police is working on to ensure the safety of our students?
Thank you so much, Gabriela. So as we heard, the district has identified some focused priorities on student well-being, a culture of respect, and customer service. Those priorities also extend to the police department. So we've been working very hard to continue to advance the training of our officers on mental health. All our officers are now required to be mental health certified. We realize that responding to calls, officers are often the first ones on the scene, so they should have the ability to de-escalate, stabilize the situation before counselors arrived or turn it over to the administration. We continue to work on community engagement so we can connect with our community. We established a new community engagement unit that is headed by Sergeant Wade Sneed. Recently, we just brought in a training to the entire department called Racial Intelligence Training and Engagement, which was mandated for all our officers as well as dispatchers. They have focused on emotional intelligence, social intelligence, workplace, and community engagement and implicit bias, to treating everybody with dignity and respect. And we continue to look forward to working on this projects with the district and the community.
Thanks so much, Chief. And before we open it up for a final Q&A, I'd like to invite Mr. Matias Segura to talk a little bit about our work around COVID readiness and facility improvement.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Certainly one of our goals is going to be to continue to keep our students and staff safe as we begin to transition out of the pandemic. That'll be the highest priority as we move forward. Certainly our commitment to delivering the 2017 bond program, as well as ensuring that our campuses become more welcoming and they support our students and staff in a way that they really need to within our communities. Certainly also want to talk about and explore the opportunities as it relates to transportation, certainly working with Dr. May's school leadership and academics to see what adjustments we can make to invite families and communities back into our schools and seeing where we might have opportunities, as Dr. Elizalde had described earlier, looking at routes, looking at different radiuses and exploring how those might ultimately support our district long-term. One of the things we're also going to be looking at is long-term planning, specifically around resiliency and exploring how the district can take a meaningful role in supporting our community through these types of severe events. So a lot of great work ahead. Excited about the work and excited about the team. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Segura. And let's take these last couple minutes to address a few questions that we've had. Starting with, where did it go? A question from Ms. Flores asking about additional details around professional development opportunities for principals as well as general education teachers. I'm presuming around better serving special education students. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa Flores.
Yes, better services and more inclusive practices.
Great.
So I would say that Dr. Mays, Leslie Stevens, and my teams are all working together to create a plan for next year. We have a goal of setting it out to our principals by May so that they can know what the next year is going to look like, and a cycle of learning for principals, executive directors, teachers around all of the topics of SEL, reading academies, leadership, services for special education, dual language. So yes, we're working on that plan to be communicated shortly.
Great, thank you so much. And Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I would add to that too, Ms. Flores. You know, all of the kids, you know, even not special needs kids, everybody should be treated well. And if you have an instance, we have Dr. Stout on the call, we have Dr. Hicks on the call. We are all about being, you know, customer service oriented. You know, Dr. Elizalde said earlier, you know, we are here to serve the community. And so anytime you all run into any issues where we all just need to sit down and have a conversation about how we can better serve you all or better meet your needs, we are always open and always willing to do that. I would also add that Ms. Costas' team has already begun to spend time with our school leaders and talking about, you know, delivering services and meeting the needs of our special needs students. So that work has begun, and again, we look forward to it continuing, and we look forward to meeting those needs that you all share with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mays. I believe there was a question from Ms. Candace Hunter earlier that didn't get answered. What is being done to facilitate the transition of teachers from one campus to the next for teachers for whom that will affect?
Yes, so our campuses, so when we've got the priority pool of teachers, what we do is they're in a priority pool, but we wait because things happen on a campus, such as we have additional teachers that decide to retire or resign or move out of the area for whatever reason. So they're in the pool, but if a vacancy shows up at their home campus, if the certification matches, they go back to their home campus. About late June, mid-July, then we look at vacancies across the district, and we do have to match them up for certification. So if I have a high school math teacher and they were at campus A, and now we have to look where we have math vacancies in the district. So, you know, we will try to get them close to, you know, their former school as we can. But along with that, we do have professional development planned in the summer, but campuses also have professional development on their campus for specific needs, you know, for that campus that they address. And you know, they would be welcomed into that campus, you know, regardless of where it's at. And that professional development would hopefully integrate them into the campus practices, you know, along with, you know, we have mentor teachers in the district as well as, you know, other supports from other departments. So each one is a little bit different and a little bit unique depending on what they teach, what their certification is in. And then we will once again offer the professional development and do the welcoming at the new school.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stevens. And I believe for our final question for this evening, I'm seeing a raised hand from Ms. Helen Miller. Ms. Miller, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I want to make sure anyone, you know, we talked about special ed kids too, but we have these most vulnerable kids that don't know how to read. So they need just as much attention as the special ed kids right about now. I also want to emphasize putting back in the fine arts, not fine arts department, but helping our kids get back into band, theater. Learning is supposed to be fun. Our children don't even know how to read, and you want to say they have a behavior problem. They don't have a behavior problem. They were never taught how to read. So that should be a priority also.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Yes, we agree that we understand that sometimes behavior is a manifestation of other things. And so it's very important that we look at all the factors that contribute to behavior. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Well, if there are no additional questions, thank you everybody for joining us. Anybody who did have a question that wasn't answered or had a very specific question that they'd like to ask that came up for them as they're thinking after this meeting. Oh, I'm seeing a raised hand from Ms. Hunter.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to clarify what I was specifically asking. I understood the staffing formula and how the process is going to work. My question is these are not chess pieces, these are humans. And so if you move it, say I've been teaching Algebra 1 and geometry at Anderson High School, and now there's an opening at Northeast. There is more that needs to happen than that first days of training and that, you know, culture to campus kind of transition. What I'm saying is, what sort of supports are you going to put in? That is a lifestyle change. if I've been teaching at, and I've done it, right? So I've been teaching at one school and now I'm at another school. In case you don't know who I am, I'll just really quickly tell you, this is what I do. I will not be able to do it any longer for AISD after this semester, but I go into campuses and I help people who have never taught in a Title I school or who have never taught in an urban district. There's so much that has to happen. So what I'm saying is what is the district putting in place? If you move a teacher and you do not move the teacher properly and with the right amount of training, we will wind up losing that teacher in October, November, and for sure by December. That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
And Ms. Hunter, thank you for that. And I will tell you, yes, I was one of those teachers that I actually moved schools 3 times, and each one was a very, very different experience, but all unique in their own way. I will tell you right now, I do not have a specific answer to your question. I know we work closely with school leadership, and a lot of that is a campus-based, leadership, culture, climate on the campus. And I know that is one of our district scorecard goals. And that is an area where we do need to, make sure that all of our schools have a climate and culture that is open and willing and providing the proper support to teachers. Now, we do have mentor teacher programs in the district. And, depending on the situation and we could check with each of those teachers. And if they request it, we could look at providing them a mentor teacher from that campus. So there are pieces that we have in place at the district, but I haven't specifically thought through that one. But I can put that on my list of, looking at each of those people that are in our priority pool from being moved from one campus to the other and seeing what supports they would feel they need in order to move successfully to another school.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Stevens. And
Let me add one more thing, Gabriela, because I do think it's I know there are lots of questions we didn't get to, but we'll get to them one-on-one individually as we collect this. But to this, I did want to just say one other thing. The match that I saw in the chat is really important, right? Because teaching at LASA is very different from teaching at Northeast at Eastside Memorial. Not worse, not better, they're very different. And I might be good in one particular school, and I might need a lot of support, which is what I think I'm hearing from you with regard to going to another school. And in some instances, it may not be a match even with different types of support. Conversely, the same thing. I only taught in schools with high percentages, if you will, of economically disadvantaged and children, that look like me, that look like some of you. And so for me to be teaching at a school that looks vastly different than that, I probably would not have been a good match at some of those schools. So with that, I do know that's one of the reasons we're going to wait later than we would typically wait, because as teachers choose to resign or to go somewhere else, then we want to have an opportunity for a teacher who was on that campus, if their certification matches, that they would be able to remain there. So in other words, our first commitment is if we can keep the teacher on the campus where they're at, then that's going to be our first choice. If it doesn't, then we're going to engage in a dialogue, and the principal of a receiving school has to be part of that dialogue. Dr. Mays' team, they have to be part of that dialogue to ensure that what we don't do is create new issues rather than our attempt to be more effective with our students. We need to make sure that we also set everybody up. We need to set our teachers, our principals up to be successful, because ultimately their work is with our children. So totally hear what you're saying, and we will work to more specifically develop a plan through Ms. Stevens' office that will actually outline, this will be what we do first, this will be second, and then to Ms. Hunter's point is ensure that we bring on some additional, Ms. Stevens, I think what I heard from Ms. Hunter, which I think is a great idea, is who and what other additional support services can we bring in specifically for some of those that would be a vastly different group of students that we would be serving. And I would imagine we could even get some additional support from and ideas through our equity office and some other areas to ensure we provide that initial training along with someone who can guide that individual on a new campus. So really thank you so much for all of these questions that you all have provided us.
Great. We are so grateful for the discussion we've had today and for the time y'all have all chosen to take out of your schedules to come and talk to us. Please, if you'd like to continue the discussion, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with any of the members of the leadership team or their colleagues, whoever makes the most sense to answer your request. And we will be taking any of the questions from the chat that weren't addressed today and making sure that those get answered as well. As a reminder, this session was recorded. It will be uploaded at a later date if you'd like to revisit it or share. And again, we're so grateful for everybody for taking the time out of their schedules. I know things are hectic right now with the end of the school year, and we're so happy to be able to start these conversations and very much look forward to continuing them. So thank you to our participants. Thank you to our leadership team, and I hope everybody has a great night.